Good morning, everybody, and how are we? You are live with Writing.ie on the Writing.ie Facebook page. I'll try that again, and on YouTube. And we're delighted to welcome you to Winning the Writing Game. The books are falling down behind me already. We're having one of those days. I know I'm not allowed to say anything about technical difficulties. So, how are you all? Hopefully you've had a good week. Simon Trin, who you can't see, is giving me funny faces here now because I mentioned it. It's lovely to have you all with us. I'm just going to wait for you to come online because I know there's a little bit of a lag. We are delighted to welcome Rachel Donohue to the Writing Game today. Lots of you have been asking about how debut authors get on and wanted us to talk to a debut author, and that's exactly what she is. She was nominated as one of the best newcomers in Ireland this year at the Irish Book Awards, and her novel, The Temple House Vanishing, went straight into the bestseller list. But Rachel's background is in short stories, so we're going to be talking a lot about short stories, and as you know, Mr. Trewin is a judge for the Costa Awards as well, so he's an expert on short stories too, and for the Writing.ie Short Story of the Year as well. So we've got lots to talk to her about how she got to the point of writing Temple House Vanishing and her process, and hopefully it'll be illuminating for you guys because she's just a little bit different. So I'm going to bring them in now. Give me 1 second. Here's Simon coming through. They'll just count him in, and then I'll bring Rachel in. There we go. Good morning, Mr. Trewin. What's the weather like in London?
It's pretty miserable, but it's Friday and it's noon, and that always brightens my day, whatever the weather's like. So there we go. Was that cheesy enough for you? I thought that was pretty good.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Now, here we go. Here's Rachel. There we go, Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Rachel's just down the road from me, where it's actually there's a tiny bit of blue sky.
Yeah, breaking through some blue.
Indeed. Now, I'm going to leave you two to it. Give me 1 second and let you chat.
Suddenly we get more of the screen than we did before.
Oh, yeah.
Good morning, and thank you firstly for giving up precious writing time to spend an hour with us. What would you normally be doing at noon on a Friday? Is it a good creative moment for you?
Yeah, the mornings are my writing time. I have 2 children, so once they're gone, I then have to do a walk religiously. Otherwise, I feel like I can't write, and then I have to be back by 10 a.m. And if I'm later than that or earlier, that's not good. But once I'm back at 10, then I write till about 2:30. So yeah, mornings. Now with lockdowns and everything this year, obviously things change. So I kind of switched to afternoons, but ideally most mornings would be my time.
Yeah, it's interesting that thing about walking because, you know, obviously like everybody else, I'm working from home at the moment. Every morning I walk up to the cafe, I get a coffee, then I walk home. But when I'm walking home, I'm not walking home, I'm walking to the office.
Yes, it's
it's the same building. And I know we're going to be talking a lot about place, but I mean, is it important for you to leave the home and return to the place where you work?
Yeah, I think I think that's probably right. And I think it's a ritual as well. I think I don't know about other writers, but I think ritual plays a big role, and superstition in a funny way, you know, that if I have something that works, I become I really need to keep with that. So it's a slight inflexibility, slight superstition, and also kind of a positive ritual. And I think as well, it's amazing the things you know, I think it's such an insular career and you're sitting on your own or whatever for X amount of hours, just being out and seeing people grabbing the coffee. And as you say, then having this sort of distance between you and home. And I generally am not thinking about the story, but I do feel it plays a role, just that kind of space in the morning before I deep dive back in, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've been working with authors for 27, 28 years, and actually I've got to know more about how writers work during lockdown than I have in the preceding 27 years, just because it's a solitary life, but necessarily so, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I do listen to music, so I like music when I'm writing, but phone has to be put away, internet nearly disabled. You know, I really need to just get to that point of pure silence, really, you know, and just to go into it. Which again was a challenge, obviously, this year with children and husband home working and all of that. But it's amazing what you can do when you really, really, really want to. You know, you can just shut it out and try and build that bubble for yourself. I
mean, I think if you are being distracted, you're not in the zone, and I think sometimes it's good not to fight it. If you're being distracted, just go and be distracted. There's a reason, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're not there. And I also find I have a kind of decompression for a good sort of 30 minutes to an hour after writing, where I'm not fully back in the real world for a while, so I always have to build that time in before I sort of take the wrong, route to the school or something to collect kids. It's, I'm not fully, when you're really there, you are in another place, and decompress to come back out of it,
I mean, my earlier life was in theatre and performing arts, and I know that a lot of actors, other halves, would say, "Oh, he's a nightmare at the moment because he's playing a murderer in whatever," and he comes home and he's yet to shed the makeup and the costume and the character.
It's like method. Yeah.
So we've got a lot to talk about. The kind of research I love doing for these is I just love finding like really obscure interviews you've done and then throwing them back at you. So we're going to be talking about Mad Men. We're going to be talking about that Seurat painting, which is amazing. We're going to be talking about Shirley Jackson. There's some really good influences there.
Right.
But before we talk about that and the two novels, let's go back to remind me what you studied. You were at Trinity, weren't you?
No, I was UCD.
UCD, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, and I didn't study English. So for anybody who has never studied English and didn't read all the stuff they were supposed to read or whatever, I was going to study English, but I had a kind of disaster, and I was, good at English or whatever, but I had a sort of disastrous leaving cert English exam, which is our final exam. And I passed and everything, but I didn't get the mark that I would have hoped. And I had a kind of existential crisis over the summer. Where I said, maybe I'm not supposed to do English, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I did philosophy and politics, and I'm actually really glad in a way I didn't study English to some degree, because for me, reading firstly, I love the subjects I did do, and I there was huge learning in that, but I kind of always kept books for just pure enjoyment. They've never become a text to me. They're always a story. They're always something that I'm really trying to escape into. So I think, it's one of those things that kind of life has a way of, it was the right thing, though at the time, probably at 18, I was like, oh, I should be doing English lit somewhere. But I certainly feel I've always stayed a reader rather than a studier of novels. I often think I don't, I kind of, for me, it's atmosphere, it's story, it's place, it's character. It's never become anything too academic in that sense. I just want a good story. I want to escape into something, and have characters that excite me.
I mean, I think that's interesting, doing, philosophy and things, because in a way that's probably better. That's better sort of a basis to be a writer than it is to go and study writing, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, as I said, I'd often think I'd love to go back now and do something and, just disappear into English literature for a while or whatever. But I just start writing too. But yeah, I think philosophy teaches you to structure.
Yeah,
and it teaches you kind of discipline in just the way you formulate maybe a position on something, and I think that was useful. And then when I left college, I worked in communications and corporate communications, so I was writing a lot, but it was obviously with a business hat on or more of a marketing hat. But I think that was really useful because it's almost like a muscle. I was writing a lot in my 20s and early 30s, and also learning how to, kind of compress and, really be succinct. So I've always been writing, but not the fiction and wanting to do stories it was there in my teens. It disappeared as I wanted to earn a bit of money and be whatever effective in the world. And then again, it came back in my early 30s. I just, suddenly it was just there again. I just want to sit down. I need to put something on the page and express something. And it sort of started when my second daughter was born. I had some time off from work with maternity leave, and I got some time in the mornings to sort of go into it. And that's really when the short story started to come.
And did you, it's interesting that you talk about exercising the muscle, because I think a lot of writers are hung up on how many words they write in a day or whatever. Sometimes it's just writing, even if they end up not in the final edit.
Yeah, it's fragments, isn't it? It's just kind of bits and pieces. And I never throw anything out because, again, for a long time I wasn't formulating anything in the shape of a story, but it might be something I'd seen on the Dart going to work, or a character in a coffee shop, and so I might just do 2 paragraphs on something and then leave it, and not go near it again. But it's amazing how some of those ideas reemerge then, in a short story, something that I had. Don't you remember that woman you thought about, or who ran this thing? So nothing ever goes to waste. But I certainly never beat myself up, and I think that's a big thing. Never beat yourself up, about whatever it is. If 3 words are coming out, that's all that was meant to come out at that time, and not obviously discipline, focus, all of those things come into it along the, as you go along. But nothing you do is wrong. Nothing you do is wrong, and
I think
everything's serving a purpose of some kind.
We talked to Ian Colfer recently, and he was talking about how he never threw anything away, and it's something quite a few writers have said actually over the last few months. And do they kind of hang around like ghosts in your room, waiting to be called?
Yeah, they're kind of, I find the ones that stay, I'm not a big notebook person. I know some people really are in terms of, scribbling bits and pieces down. I'm not so much that. I think the characters or the ideas, they sort of stay. The ones that they have a stickiness to them.
Right.
And they're the ones that kind of emerge. So I'm not somebody who's always scribbling, but when I have something that's resonating enough and it won't go away, as you say, like a kind of ghost or imaginary friend kind of, then I know I'm at that point of writing them. But again, as I say, I'm not somebody who's always putting things in notebooks. It just doesn't seem to work for me. That I like the structure of sitting down and turning it into 2 or 3 paragraphs or a page, rather than just constantly.
I'm interested. 30 is still a fairly young age, but a lot of people. I love the fact that you came to write. It felt like you were being called to the page at the age of 30. There was something kind of bubbling up, and life was arranging itself in a way that you could do it.
Yeah.
Did it feel like an indulgence writing for yourself after a decade of writing corporately for other people?
Yeah, I think not so much an indulgence, maybe more of a. I do sometimes feel I experience the world through words more nearly than being in it generally. It's sort of, and for me, it was a way of reorienting. And I think after having children, I was sort of, there's slight identity crisis, a little bit of who kind of I've been working woman, I've been, now I'm mother. What does that really mean? And, kind of, I suppose maybe even a legacy kind of feeling as well, of kind of that there's children are a legacy, but also so are your thoughts, in terms of how you felt about the world and how you experienced the world. And in a way that kicked in at that point for me. And also confidence too. And I know it's a cliche, everybody talks about failure, et cetera, but like the feeling of, I had to be confident enough to do something and fail at it, but also know that it didn't matter because I had to do it anyway.
Right. Okay.
What I think when I was younger, and I mean, I'm so admiring of people who find their voice and do so much when they're young, but for me, I needed to be strong enough for it not to work out before I could kind of go there. And I think just that for me, having the children and feeling, I'm at this point now where there's, I'm able to do this, and it's not really about being, there's nothing, again, a little bit, there's nothing you can do is wrong, really. It just, you just have to do it if that's the way you're feeling. And it's very freeing. It's very freeing, not to be thinking about, is this going to be put, like, I never thought about things being published. It was always just try and tell it, try and put it down on the page. And let that be your driver, not the world outside. You have to forget the world.
Yeah. So in a way, when you are writing, whether it's whether it's short stories or longer, are you writing for yourself? You're not writing for a reader?
I think I'm writing for myself up to a point. I mean, yes, I am. I think I'm trying to entertain myself. And as I say, I kind of feel I experience the world through words, whether it's as, a reader. I'll always be a reader more than a writer. I've read, that's who I am. And so for me, I do approach it a little bit like I'm the reader in a way.
Yes.
And is this fulfilling me? Is it, making me want to read more? I just don't think, I think you can get spooked if you think about other people too much or too early. You know, certainly in the editing process and all the other stuff where you're trying to make something better, that's when you can be a little bit more attuned. But I think writers need to be free. For me anyway, I need to be sort of free of fear, free of any sense of what other people are doing. You know, the table is long. There's space for everybody at the table. Don't ever worry about that. You know, and I certainly never thought about genres. I never thought about trends, like all this stuff. Just put it away, you know. And all you have to do is focus on your story that you're trying to tell, or the story you're trying to tell.
So the first short story which ended up being published, was that the first short story you'd written?
No, it wasn't. I'd say the first short story I wrote was for the RTE Guide here had a competition with Penguin Ireland, and that was the very first short story. And I think it was one of the first years of it. I sent it off, and I got a lovely note back. It had made a sort of shortlist, not a winning thing or anything, but I got a lovely note back from the MD of Penguin Ireland, who just said, you know, thank you for whatever entering, but I think you might have something.
Okay.
And you should keep going.
Brilliant.
And that was it. And, you know, it was just the right kind of feedback at the right moment, because I just thought, oh, okay. Because it's very hard to know whether you have anything to say until you say it. And then you get feedback is so important, and feedback from decent, knowledgeable people is so important. And for me, that's why competitions were, you know, I didn't have any connections with literary community or anything like that. I didn't know any editors of anything. So for me, competitions were a way of just kind of putting it out there a little bit safely. And then to get a little crucial bit of feedback, you know, not winning anything, not, you know, no bells or anything on it, but just somebody saying, you know, keep going. So that was really important.
So I represent a short story writer, Mary Costello, who's
fabulous, yeah,
the same island as you, and I think what's really interesting there is, you know, she's written short stories and she's written novels, and I get the sense that, you know, writing a novel, I'm not saying it's easier than writing a collection of short stories, but she wears a different head. And you know, like you, Mary takes her writing very, very seriously and really thinks about the resonance of every word. But I'm interested in, does it feel freeing when you're writing a 100,000 word novel? Does it feel scary? Are you running off into a unknown?
Yeah, I think the big difference is, you know, literally length, you know, and having a canvas that's so much bigger, you know. And I spent a good 6 years just doing short stories, 6-7 years. That's how totally where I was at. And so, you know, the big challenge is kind of, you know, making it just bigger, you know, literally just pushing the walls out, you know, blowing out the sides of the house and making it just that much bigger. And, you know, and I'm still on that journey. You know, Temple House Vanishing had a tight, you know, cast of characters, a sort of tight location, etc. And for me, that was my first step of trying to do something bigger. Then in the second book, which will be out next year, the canvas has gotten a little bit bigger again. You know, there's a few more people, it's a bigger place. So, you know, it's constantly learning. And I do think I approach it, I have a brevity in my writing that comes from short stories, and it comes from my work previously, that it's kind of, how can you get, you know, and for me, my first edit, you know, funny, my first draft of both the first book and the second are, you know, they're thin enough, you know. It's like, for me, the editing process is actually where I put more in. So I don't come with loads of words. I come with, you know, kind of thin enough story. Everybody's there, but they're, you know, it's not as warm. It can be a bit cold as well. It's like I've kind of put everyone, the chessboard is there. So editing for me is always going back and going much more, increasing the word count rather than cutting it. So that, I think, comes from the short story experience as well. You know, I capture things kind of succinctly, and then with a novel, you need to just bring it, go deeper, go bigger, you know.
So you're adding another layer, more texture, are you? More
and I'll go back to each character, and I'll So obviously there's the looking at the full story, which is usually there now. In both cases, there's been no issues with that. But for me, the editing, then I'll go back to each character individually and just go through the whole book on them, or just go through their relationship with whoever. And I'll really work deeply on that. Then step back again, look at the narrative as a whole, but then I'll have to go back. But I do think it comes from the short story background of, I can sketch a life in 2 pages. It's kind of, that's what you're learning when you're writing short stories. And you need to go bigger, obviously. And really
we've thought a lot about structure, and you said you're not a big one for notebooks.
No.
Does that mean you go where the characters want you to go, or do you know where your destination is but not the route, or
I know the destination, but I don't know how we're getting there.
Okay.
So I'm not the person to ask for advice on plot and structures in that sense, but I do always know where it's going. And I've actually, in both books, I wrote the end quite close to when I was at the beginning of the book as well. I was writing the beginning and the end simultaneously on both.
Okay.
And then as the story progressed, I would change it, the end a little bit. But for me, it really helps to know where we're going, and also, or how it ends rather. And that really informs the tone then, because I think when you know that last piece of the puzzle, it starts to inform as you're writing the actual story. But in terms of turning up every day, I literally am guided by, and I know it used to irritate me when you hear novelists saying that, the characters, take over, blah, blah, blah. But they do develop a kind of logic. They do develop a sort of logic, and that then drives, for me anyway, it drives the story on. And then having the ending, knowing how it's ending, obviously gives some structure to it. But I'm not, I don't have things mapped out or anything like that.
When we talked to Sophie Hannah a couple of months ago, and she said that the first thing she does is, she writes what's on the back of the book.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that becomes the thing. She sticks it up there, and then she was kind of wonderfully fierce. She just said, the characters do what I tell them to do, I need them to go here. If I'm writing a Poirot book, Poirot, forget all that. He does what I tell him to do. And I think, that's an interesting way of doing it. And we also, we were asking Jeremy Dyson about writer's block, and he said that if he gets a character in the room and he doesn't know what they're supposed to do, he realizes he hasn't done enough work on developing the character. So he kind of gets out of the room and thinks, well, blah, 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 and then gets them back in again. And do you... It sounds like your characters evolve during the first draft, and then you kind of rewrite, you re-engineer things as you go through the next one.
Yeah, not so much re-engineer, or just try and enrich a little bit more, get the understanding of why they've behaved like this or why they acted like that.
Yeah.
Just try and really get under their skin a little bit more. But I feel kind of like I'm sort of God in, that's my role in a way, so that they have free will.
That's the headline for the day. Writer thinks she's God, but no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that it's kind of, there's free will, but there's a fate to some extent as well, and that it's going somewhere, and I'm in charge of that bigger picture. But my role is kind of to let them grow or not grow, let them make bad decisions, let them make good decisions, and give them that sort of freedom on the page. But the destination is mine, in the end.
Yeah. Just to go back a few minutes, you said at one point, was it with Temple House Vanishing, you were writing the end and the beginning at the same time?
Yeah.
So writing out of sequence is something that you find enables your ability to construct a narrative, does it? It's
the only thing I did out of sequence. It's the only thing I did, was to know how it would end. Other than that, everything else is each day sitting down and seeing where it's going. And again, I think I'd be, characters are for me everything, in terms of, creating the mood, the atmosphere. Obviously, the place is very important, setting, but, it really is, it's these people turn up, and I kind of I'm trying to understand them as I'm writing.
Okay.
What they're about and why they're here and what they're trying to say. So it's a kind of dialogue. It's a dialogue in that sense.
And looking at some of the fantastic reviews you've had for Temple House Vanishing, I think it was, Christine Hickey was saying about she made a parallel to Daphne du Maurier.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds to me like the setting of your new book is also has a kind of there's a nod to Daphne du Maurier in terms of, you know, the house and the. But is that a conscious reference for you, or is it just a big influence on you?
No, it's not really. I mean, I love My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier. That's actually would be. I do love that book, but I haven't read much else really by her actually. But I do love My Cousin Rachel, and I think she was very underrated as a writer, a bit like Shirley Jackson. You know, that they kind of, you know, pitched in a certain direction or whatever. But no, it's not conscious. The next book is seaside oriented, but that was by accident.
So was there a, I mean, you had a lot of acclaim very quickly with the short story with Hennessy and and I bet you won an award as the Irish Writer of the Year, didn't you?
The Hennessy Award in 2017, for a short story, The Taking of Mrs. Kennedy, that I wrote. So yeah, that was great. And that was one of those points where I just sort of decided maybe I need to just give this a chance and see if I can do something, either a collection of short stories or a novel. And I thought I'd try and see if I could do the novel. And again, there's a link between that story that won. In the background of that story, there's a school and there's somebody gone missing, and that then actually fed through to Temple House. So again, it's all kind of connected without you really knowing it's connected. There's something playing out. Yeah. So that was 2017. Yeah.
Before we and for those people who aren't in Ireland watching this, and I know we've got people from Nova Scotia and all over the world. The Hennessy is a kind of gold standard, isn't it? It's like you win that. That's a big prize as a short story writer, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is, and it has a lot of history. You know, I suppose that's what I liked about it. It's been going for years, I think since the 70s or so, in various different guises. And for me, you know, the stories were published in one of the newspapers, so it was either the Irish Independent or the Irish Times. And you know, reaching readers is the kind of thing for me. Obviously, you know, you want to try and reach out to people, and I liked that about it, that if you were good enough to get published, you had a broad audience of people, you know, who wouldn't be necessarily, you know, maybe the most knowledgeable about every literary event in Ireland or whatever, but that, you know, that somebody might read you on a Saturday morning having their coffee, and that the kind of democracy of it was really. And again, for me, the short stories were just discipline, meeting a timeline, sending it off. You know, you never think you're going to win, really. You're just trying to do your best and just put it out there. So again, I think competitions are hugely useful in that way, in driving you forward, whether you win anything or not, you know.
So tell us about the moment that there are two moments I'm interested in. The first time you were published as a short story writer, was that through
the Hennessy, actually? Yeah, I entered it 3 times and was published 3 times. So the first time was in the Irish Independent.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a bit. I mean, I'm quite a private person and quite an introverted person, you know. So there's a sort of shocking exposure involved with it, you know. Even though it's, you know, the story you've made up, you kind of feel, God, you know. And the amount of people, again, who see it because it's in a sort of national paper or whatever. So it was sort of equally daunting and frightening and equally thrilling to see your words there. And to have, you know, randomly somebody said, "Oh, my mother read your story," you know, just that feeling of, my God, and they liked it, you know, or they thought it was good, that you've reached out to people. Because I think writers are fundamentally just kind of lonely people trying to reach out. You know, I do think if you were, you know, if you'd more friends and a better life, you know, maybe you wouldn't be doing this. But, you know, there's an element of connection that you know, I certainly feel I'm an observer in life. You know, I've always been that, even long before I ever started writing.
Yeah.
You know, of just sort of somebody who maybe isn't taking part in something, but is, I know it's such a cliche, but just kind of observing, and, you know, the detail of life and the things people say and the way they put their bag down, you know, or, you know, the politics of an office, or, you know, just the crazy stuff. I'd always be kind of just watchful, you know, and interested in that. And then I think the readers are your way of just thinking, you know, you've connected So it's a strange one, you know. It's very exposing, and yet you're a private person, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose ultimately, you know, that's fascinating, that sort of contradictory thing of privacy, but then also you write to be read ultimately, don't you?
Exactly. And you'd be upset if nobody had ever seen it, or if nobody ever, you know. But I do think, and I saw somebody writing about this recently, that, you know, success, you know, I think you have to have a good handle on what is success for you. You know, and for me, success is just telling the story. Like everything else is a bonus. You know, so, you know, getting an agent, wow, that's a bonus. Or maybe somebody wanting to publish it, that's amazing. But it has to be, I think, the story. It has to be the words. That the only thing you really have, the only thing you control is the telling of that story. After that, and I think you can, you know, you just have to balance those things, particularly when you're starting off, just so that failure doesn't, because it's just, there is so much rejection. There is so many things that don't work out, you know, that you think, God, what happened there? So, you know, for me, that's how I manage it, is to say, look, I'm doing my absolute best, and the only failure is not doing this, writing that story. Everything else, whether it has one person read it or, you know, whatever, is a bonus. And I think that's important for people to just kind of understand your understanding of success and what it means, and not to be put off.
Yeah. No, I mean, I often think that, you know, some writers write to be bestsellers, and other people write because there's a story burning a hole somewhere in their soul that they think, I've got to get this down on paper. Obviously with the Hennessy, you know, you obviously edit yourself and then you send the work in, and then you know, you win, and that's fantastic. It's a different process though, writing a novel, isn't it? Because with a novel, you are writing, someone's paid you some money.
Yeah.
There's a contract, there's a physical contract, and there's a kind of moral contract, isn't there, between the creator and the person who's in charge of the means of production. So just tell me, does the editorial process work differently for you when it's a novel?
Yeah, because I'd never had an editor before. You know, I just wrote my stories. I didn't even have, you know, maybe one reader of them before I'd send them off. So, you know, it was so private and all of that.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed the editing process, actually, on both books. And the collaborative, because you've been so isolated in a way working on it. It's so wonderful to have a collaborative, particularly an editor who, you know, is so good or understands your work or sees something. And, you know, there is a point definitely where, however good you think you are, you're not that good. You know, like you can
always be better. Yeah.
Yeah, you can be better. And you're in the forest of, you know, you can't see the trees at all, you know, and there's, so it's such a relief to step away and kind of take that break. And obviously, again, giving your, you know, when you write something, walk away from it. Now, with the novels, I haven't had as much time as I would have liked. But when I was doing short stories, like the story that won the Hennessy, I had written it the previous year, didn't look at it for like 12 months, and then took it out and then made some edits, maybe 2 or 3 weeks of work on it, and sent it off. Because it's amazing when you have space, you know, from the work. Even if you don't have an editor, give yourself space. And obviously with an editor, then you get that break from it. They look at it, they come back. And if you've a good editor, because again, I was nervous, are they very prescriptive? Are they going to tell me, you know, this and the other to do? And, you know, good editors are not, you know, they're all about just the flow and, you know, little gaps maybe that you haven't seen. They're not telling you what to do, you know, they're trusting you, and you're trying to build that trust. So I really enjoyed it. And I think maybe I've been lucky. I've just worked with really nice people in Corvus. But it's worked for me. And even on book 2, I was a bit nervous that, you know, I'd be under more pressure or, you know, more questions. But I felt like I had a lot of freedom from Sarah Hodgson in there. You know, she liked the rough kind of idea. And then after that, she was like, talk to me in, you know, 6 months kind of thing. You know, so that was really nice feeling. Because again, I don't think I'd like pressure of somebody too prescriptive. That wouldn't work for me. But again, it might work for other people. It just wouldn't work for me.
I mean, I think Sarah Hodgson, who's a fine editor, I think she's respectful of the creative process, isn't she?
Yeah.
It's interesting. One of our viewers, D. Scallon, is saying, I'm taking from this the 3 Ds: discipline, destination, decompression. And I would suggest that from what you just said, we should add a fourth D, which is distance, because I think
distance, yeah.
You know, that's so we've got 4 Ds now. There may be another one pops up in the next 20 minutes, but you know, that because I think a lot of people, a lot of inexperienced writers will, you know, type the end, click attach, and then send it off to 75 agents and publishers and be surprised. Then they come back and go, not quite sure about this. But coming back to something a year after you've written it, did you, your first experience of reading that, did you come to that as a reader again? I mean, was it like you were reading something that someone else had written?
Yeah, it is like, that's exactly it. That's a really good way of putting it, because you suddenly see, you know, just little errors, you know, and little, like, where the story arc just, you know, didn't quite go, or, you know, whatever it might be, that character was a bit, whatever, one-dimensional. You do come as a reader, and you aren't as emotionally invested. And I think that's the thing, you know, when you've written something, and as you say, you're so excited, you've worked so hard, you're ready to send it off to Simon to see if he would like to take you on or whatever. Don't, you know, walk away, walk away. And, you know, give yourself a little bit of time, because you're so emotionally invested at that point. It's like a kind of love affair or something. It's like, it's just like, you're so, this book is amazing. I've done so much work. I've tried so hard, but you're not seeing it properly. You're in the honeymoon still.
Yeah.
And as I say, it's the one thing I wish I had, but because I'm always flying by the seat of my pants a bit, I wish I had more time with the novels, funnily, to take, you know, if I could build in more time to step away before I send it to my editor. I think that would be, that I'd love to achieve that next time, you know, to have, you know, 5 or 6 weeks where it doesn't go anywhere. It sits in the laptop. And if I can manage that, I'd be thrilled with myself. But yeah, you're too emotionally invested in it.
Okay. Are you, while you're writing your novels, are you also little fires of short stories emerging as well that need to be put out or encouraged?
Yeah, I love short stories. I really do. I love reading short stories, and I love novellas as well. I was mentioning that to Vanessa before. God, I love to write a novella. Would be one of my personal aims. I don't think anyone would publish it, but I would love to do it. So I do love the short form, but they are a lot of work. You know, they really are. And it's, for me at the moment, I had one published in the Irish Times earlier this year. I'm managing about, since I've started writing the novels in the last 2 years, I'm managing about 1 or 2 short stories only a year. So, you know, because they really do take a lot of crafting. And, you know, if you're going to put it out there, you want it to be good. So I'm not so much sparking with ideas, but there are certain stories that do suit it. But you do need to give it the time. And so when I'd finished Temple House, I was working on a story. I had this idea of a story in a house in Fitzwilliam Square, an office. And I took some time out after Temple House was finished just to work on that. And then again, I left it for about 3 or 4 months, and then I sent it to my agent, and just to see, look, is this in any way decent? And she thought, no, you know, that's good. And I got that published earlier this year. But yeah, they're not churned out. You know, I don't think anyone who's serious about them churns them out, you know.
So is writing a novel a marathon, do you think? And a short story is a kind of, I don't know, decathlon maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's not a sprint anyway.
No.
It is. It's different, and it is those glimpses of people, like, you know, that, you know, great phrase around just glimpsing, and I find it very inspiring. I'm not great when I'm writing. I can't read novels.
Okay.
I have a weird thing. I just cannot have anyone else's voices. I'm so afraid that I'll be infected with genius that is not mine, that it belongs to someone else, you know. So I tend to read a lot of nonfiction when I'm writing, but I am able to dip into short stories. So for me, it's great to read short stories when I'm writing fiction. It just gives me that little bit of burst of, oh, great, a story, without the depth of the novel. I need to keep away from other people's novels when I'm working.
I think rereading's a really good thing as well, isn't it? Because I was just struck earlier on when you were saying about knowing the destination and obviously knowing the beginning and the characters. That when we take favorite books off the shelf and we reread whatever it may be, you know, we know the ending, but sometimes we forget the journey, and that's the joy of rereading, isn't it? Is that rediscovering how the author does what they do.
Yeah. and the good ones stay fresh, and they're very comforting as well. You know, you just go back and you do see different things. And even having written novels now, I think I certainly watch TV very differently at the moment. I don't know whether I read differently, but it's amazing how when you have constructed a longer narrative, you're like, God, that doesn't work on.
So what are you watching at the moment? Are you watching
I just finished, speaking of, I watched The Haunting of Hill House on Netflix.
Okay, I haven't watched that. I will add it to the list.
I really recommend it from a storytelling point of view, actually, to everybody. Because it's very loosely based. It's not a dramatic it's a retelling. But I do think television has some of the most amazing writing at the moment.
Totally agree.
And the storytelling and characters, and like you mentioned, Mad Men. You know, it'd be hard to think of a character from fiction. More, say Don Draper or somebody. There's very few standouts like that in the last 20 years. I think it's hard to have people come off.
Yeah, because I think with Don, he would have been an amazing character without that kind of hinterland. But there was that dark secret, wasn't there? That was constantly being peeled back like an onion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for anybody interested in character, sometimes I think when you're learning, it's very useful to watch some of those kind of classic shows like Mad Men, or, as I say, I really would recommend The Haunting of Hill House. Of just how character and plot, just how they do it so seamless. Watching the latest series of The Crown, so that's my escape. But I do find when you've written something, you do look at things differently in terms of narrative structure, and go, God, that's so clever, or oh no, that's not working. You do have an awareness that maybe you didn't before.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't watched The Crown because I don't think it's my kind of thing, but but that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because quite clearly how The Crown is being judged, it's being judged by how much the actors look like the people they're playing, and whether the depiction of Diana is factually correct. But I mean, when you talk about the fiction, the non-fiction research you're doing, do you feel in any way you have to be true to fact that is underlying in a novel?
Yeah, I mean, I think, or what I'm hoping is that, certainly, and again, as a reader, I think there has to be a fundamental truth in a novel.
Okay.
Now, it doesn't mean it's the truth, but there's and I think this is what gives why some books stay with you and maybe some don't. Is that there sort of has to be a foundational stone of something important or something that for you is truth as the writer. And then you put lie after lie after lie, on top of that, and you change it. But I think there's a sort of, and as I say, it's not an event or something that happened to you, a truth, but there's a sort of, we have, as people, and certainly at a certain point in your life, you have a kind of perspective on truth, on what meaning is in your life, or what meaning is in other people's lives, or what's almost like an ethical position on life.
Okay.
And on the decisions people make, and on the cruelties or the wonderful, whatever focus you have. And I think readers get that.
Yes.
There's you have to be as authentic as you can be, I think. And I think that's, and which is why it's quite interesting about The Crown, the debates, as you say, about is this fact, is it fiction, does it need to have, a fiction, health warning on it. I think it's, do we feel there's a truth in the story that's being told, whatever that story might be, and I think that's what you're striving for. It's not so much fact, it's kind of truth. And that's what people feel when they read your words. Do you really believe what you're saying, even though you've made it all a crazy world up, and it's all strange, or it could be science fiction? It's nothing about being real, but it's about kind of a truth. And I think that helps you find your voice, when people talk about voice. And I now, you would be able to talk better about what a voice, I don't really know, but I do think it's sort of linked to authenticity of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, I think that word voice is interesting, isn't it? Because, what is a voice? It's one of those things, I remember when I first heard Amy Winehouse singing, literally, I thought, that is a transformative voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and I know when I don't know, when I first read Maupassant, you know, you pick up a short story and within a paragraph, you just think, you know, I'm in for the journey, you know, something that draws you in. But I think particularly with commercial fiction, sometimes people are fighting to find a voice. And I think you need to let the voice find you, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. I don't think you sit down and say, today I'm going to be the macabre voice. So, you know, it just doesn't work like that. I think it comes from the truth of what you're trying to say. And I think that is what permeates through. And also it's about trust. You know, I think, you know, the reader, and as a reader, I want to trust that someone's leading me into a world.
Yeah.
You know, I need to feel, and it doesn't matter how crazy that world is, I have to feel like I'm trusting them to take me there and to take me through it. And I think that again comes back to that sort of, what do you want to say?
Okay.
Not how you say it. It's not pretty sentences. It's not fancy this, that, or the other. You know, and again, I think you can get afraid of, you know, am I good enough at plot twists? Am I good enough this and the other? But it's actually about just finding that sort of kind of authentic, what are you trying to say? And then you'll find the way to say it. And it might take the form of space rockets, you know, or it might take the form of nuns in a school, or it might take the form of whatever. You know, it just, I think you can get hung up and worried about things like that when you're trying, and you shouldn't. Just speak from your heart in a way, you know.
Are there any short stories that you've written that, looking back on them now, you think, I wonder whether I might like to expand that into a longer form? Now you know you can go the distance.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I tend to. I'm working on something at the moment. I'm just in the. That's something else for me. My thinking time takes a while with an idea. Yeah. And I have, at the moment, funnily enough, I have a character in mind who briefly appeared in a short story a few years ago. Okay. So they do. And again, it's back to that point of not throwing anything away. You know, that there's the oddest fragments of people, you know, or ideas that do resonate even 2 to 3 years later. So, you know, throw nothing out. They can come back, and they are like ghosts a little bit, as you said. You know, certain people are there, and they do come and hang out with you.
Do you see yourself? You know, do you see yourself as primarily writing novels from now on?
I'm enjoying it, Simon. You know, I'm enjoying the bigger. I'm enjoying the challenge of going bigger, because I think that is my journey now, is to just build out those characters and stories into bigger canvases. So for me, I like to be feeling like I'm kind of learning and growing. And I think at the moment, that's the space where I can kind of really do that. Having said that, as I say, I have a novella notion in my head, which I would, because some of my favorite books are novellas, and I'd love to do something like that. But at the moment, I feel I'm in a good place to just keep learning. And because there is so much to learn, it's not done just because you've written one thing or half decent thing. It's never over, I don't think. You know, or I certainly want it to be in terms of learning.
We've got the cover up, and we've got captivating, absorbing, sinister, all of those things, which are fantastic to read. How do you feel about reviews of particularly of the novels, or the novel? How do you feel reading them?
Yeah, I didn't. I kind of, again, a little bit. I mean, obviously, you're nervous, and it is handing the child over to somebody who's not cute. You know, you're like, no, you know, it is hard. But you kind of, you know, if you've good people around you, you know, whether your agent, your publisher, etc. And also, again, a little bit back to that point, and you just have to know the success end of it isn't up to you.
No.
It really isn't. And, you know, it's so subjective, and you can hit a moment, or you can, you know, all you should think about is, did you do your best? You know, really, did you really, really try? And I think that for me kind of helped me get through that phase, you know, of kind of, oh no, you know, just to kind of have that inner strength. But obviously it's always going to be nerve-wracking. I'll be nervous again. But, you know, I have to feel I did my best, and now it's not mine. It does become, at a certain point, it's not yours anymore.
Okay.
The story belongs to the people who read it. It belongs to, you know, the critics who look at it. And you have to just let them go. I can't control that. I just can't.
Because I know, going back to theatre, when I worked on plays, that, you know, reviews would come out and some of the cast would never read the reviews, because obviously as an actor, you're going out there every night and you're having to recreate an experience for people who are there. I wonder whether writing, you know, if you're writing your second novel and you read a critical novel, a review of the first one, whether it in any way affects what you do. You're trying to kind of second guess the reader, but it sounds to me like you're doing the best you can for that story, aren't you, and the character?
I think so. And I think you have to just take your strength from that, because, and it is something, you know, I'm not sure people, and obviously everybody here would appreciate it who's writing, but it is a lonely, difficult road. And only the, you know, however quiet and lonely it might be, you know, writers are probably some of the most resilient, strong people, you know, and not in any dramatic way, but, you know, purely in the way of, no matter what, you are going to face yourself. I mean, and when I finish a novel, I feel like I've extracted my bone marrow. Like, I feel like I've taken, you know, I've sort of operated on myself, you know, and there's a sort of drainedness, you know, exhausted afterwards. I'm only really starting to pick up now after, funnily enough, after finishing the second one now. And it requires, you know, that kind of just pure strength to keep going. And I think only go down the path if you're going to be ruined by regret, don't do it. You know, it's okay to regret, but don't let it ruin you. You know, so it's okay to think I could have done better, but you know, you kind of have to not take that on. It doesn't belong to you at a certain point. And I mean, you know yourself, there's books that are everybody loves and you read it and you're like, you just don't see it yourself in them, you know, and that's the way it is. And you know, you have to keep that. For me, I have to keep that on and go, well, look, I read things that everybody loves and I don't like them. This is, you know, I can't control that. But it is hard, you know, and you have to have a good team, as I say, have a good good relationship with your editor, a good relationship with your agent, so you're not so alone facing that.
I mean, I think they say that we don't have a memory for pain, so maybe that's why people keep writing.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah. And having children, which, you know, you've seen.
Yeah, it's like a selective amnesia. This time it will be different. This time, you know. But I think, again, if you're driven by not trying to be a success, you know, if you're driven by trying to write a good story in whatever shape or form that takes, you know, and you feel you did as much as you could, I think that's your only metric. To stay sane is important, you know, to stay able to write. You know, it's heartbreaking when you do read people, and you know, again, I can face this in the future like anybody else, but just, you know, when somebody undermines your confidence in your abilities, and I think that's just a painful experience, and you have to protect yourself. And I think, you know, wellness for writers, you know, whether it's walking on a cold seafront, whether it's having a good, you know, relationship with somebody who will, you know, who you trust about your writing. And, you know, and I think that's something too, you know, even don't trust everyone with your writing. Do you know what I mean? Like, really think, you know, and I know when you're starting out, and more than me, the next time around, I'm trying to, you know, write and get published, you know, don't trust, you know, make sure you trust the right people.
Yeah.
You know, because you know, you've worked so hard on something, you know, it's very precious. Of course, it's not perfect. Of course, it could be better, but, you know, you only want feedback from, you know, really decent people who are looking at the text, not at you, not at whether you're an interesting person or whether you're a cool person, or, you know, really just think about somebody who you can really trust. And before you press send, you know, make sure you're thinking about that, because, you know, the feedback is so important in your growth, and it can knock you off course and, you know, leave you with regret, and you don't want that. You know, you really don't. You have to stay strong and well.
That's so interesting, isn't it? I think there's a Morgan Freeman quote where he says, "Don't take criticism from somebody you wouldn't go to for advice."
That's good.
That is really good.
It's exactly what you're saying. You know, don't send it out there unless, you know, think about who you're sending it to.
Exactly. And it's not yourself. yeah, that you're not open to learning, because I think you are open to learning, but you can get knocked off, so you need to have the good voices around you, whether it's that really good writing club you're in or a writing group, or if you're lucky enough to have an agent starting to work with you, just trust them, not everybody else.
Yeah.
I know there are some questions that, Sam, you're going to probably bring in from the sidebar, but what's it like what was it like getting the first finished copy through?
Oh, surreal. Yeah, really surreal. The box arriving, just so odd, and to this day, like, to see it in a bookshop, and obviously because this year's been so odd with bookshops open and shut and everything, it still is, it's really humbling, actually. It's kind of just a really humbling experience to think that you've put your words into the world and they're there,
Yeah.
And at that point it has a different life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's sitting unread or read, and the pages are turned up, or someone's got a bookmark in it.
Yeah. It belongs to somebody else. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. It's really interesting, attitude, that you're thinking that that's what you can't control. You can control what's in the story. You can control, you can make that the best that it can be, but beyond that, then it comes down to other people, doesn't it?
I think that's it. I think you're extracting your own bone marrow on this. Don't let anyone else do it. Like, your job is to just do that. Just dig deep, find that stuff you're trying to say or whatever, and after that, it's no one else's job to do that to you. That's what you do, and you protect yourself from the rest.
Really interesting. There was a question earlier actually about what you guys think of Noel Coward. I don't know what you think. Right? I know it was Simon. So, yeah, I know it was a random one in there. It must have come out of something that you said. I think it was Maxie.
I don't know a lot about Noel Coward. I'm afraid I wouldn't be expert on that now. I must say.
Simon's very good on Noel Coward, aren't you?
Oh no, I think he writes highly plotted books. And highly plotted plays. So
I think it was a related plot, so it was a bit random.
Okay.
Interesting.
I really love, Rachel, that you're so different from a lot of the people we've spoken to, that you don't have that thing plotted out, that you do trust the process, that you find the story by writing, and then you go back and add the layers. And that was one of the things we were speaking before. You were talking about, like you said, that the warmth isn't there in that first draft.
No.
The first draft, find a story, and then you're going back in and you're looking at the characters and you're getting to know them. And I think that's a really interesting way of doing it. It's like when they start speaking to you, you start to get to know them more.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, they surprise you, certainly with Temple House, I thought one character was going to do something and they just wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't, that's not who they were, and it took me, the second time going in to understand. It's like, she's not going to do that. That's not who she is. And, so it is, they are like imaginary friends almost, or acquaintances at first. And then you start to understand them. You start to see the darkness or the light. And yeah, there's a part of me would love to be more organized. My husband is an auditor, so he's just alarmed by me on so many levels. In terms of, he's like, but I would have like charts, and I'm like, I can't use spreadsheets. I don't know how to do that. But like, I'm quite envious of people. I suppose it's just the difference, the difference experience. It's like the opposite of. So I do think that's wonderful to be able to do that. But for me, it's sort of, I like to get to know them and I let them tell me. But having said that, I have to turn up every day. This isn't a Mystic Meg experience. I am there every day at 10 trying to work with them on this, and get this story out. So it's not saying you throw everything out of the, it's all instinct or whatever, but I don't have that level of, I don't have that mind, that engineering mind to be able to work out things. I need to just feel it and see what they're saying. But again, the ending for me gives me the strength to do that, I think.
It's fascinating. Yeah, and I love the fact that you were saying that right at the start, when you sit down, if it's only 3 words or if it's only a short piece that you write, that there's no failure there. That's just wasn't meant to happen that day.
Exactly.
So you don't have a word count where you say, right, well, I have to. Joanne Harris has this 300 words, which I think is amazing, that she tries to hit. Right. You sit down and see what happens.
Yeah, I sit down. Now I suppose as I'm getting into it, when the story is flowing, then I do sort of set it, I'll try and get to 1,000 words, or I'll try and reach that. And then the last 100 days, and Vanessa, I don't know if you feel this, but I find the last 100 days of the book just quite extraordinary. It starts to it's almost automatic writing, nearly. It gets to the point where they're so alive. And I think I imagine if people measured your brain waves, you know, there'd be just both sides of the brain are just sparking.
Yeah.
So wonderful flow at a certain point, but that's not always there. It really isn't. But I in both books, I found out it's that last 100 about days where it starts to just spark. And even to the point where I was waking up early, you know, in that kind of conscious state, you know, just before you fully wake up, solving problems in like really bizarre. And again, you know, people could call it the muse or whatever, but it's not. It's the pure electrics, I feel, of your brain is just so heightened at that point when you're so immersed in it. You know, it starts to, and even when I'm reading back, funny, I was just doing some edits and proofs and stuff, I can feel it in me, you know, I can feel the point where it just flies, you know, and you can almost feel what was happening. And funnily enough, because I was writing a lot of this book during the pandemic, again, just interestingly, you know, I can feel the points in the writing where I was more stressed. You know, it shows up kind of, there's a tightness, which I was like, God, I need to work on that now because I don't feel as stressed as maybe I did in March, wondering what was going on in the world. So everything comes through, you know, in its own way that you're experiencing, but you kind of find a way through it, obviously, and find a way through it every day. But that last few, you know, 100 or so pages is quite magical.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in the zone, I think that's fantastic, and that's just a brilliant place actually for us to wrap up because it's been a whole hour and it's literally flown by. It's just so interesting. Thank you, Miss Trin, indeed.
Thank you, Rachel. That's been amazing. Really.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute honor. Thank you.
Oh, we're delighted. So Temple House Vanishing is in the shops now. There's the link to Easton's. There we go. Simon's got his copy. Link to Easton's in the comments, and they do free postage at the moment, I think, on it. And also they deliver to the UK for free too. So there's no excuse not to order it.
And the new book is out when?
The new book is out. May, is it?
Yeah, the new book is out the 6th of May in hardback, and it's called The Beauty of Impossible Things.
Brilliant title.
Brilliant title. Beautiful cover too. So keep an eye on there. We'll make sure the cover comes up on writing.ie. You'll be seeing that very soon. So thank you very much indeed, everybody.
Simon, thank you so much for listening to everybody for your comments. Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
Lovely to have everybody.